The illustrious Jabba bids you welcome. I'm going to regret this.
I'm Pete Mitchell. He's Peyton Jones. And this is the Church Planter Podcast, brought to you by Church Planter Magazine. Hey, Church Planter, this is Pete Mitchell.
And this is Peyton Jones.
Coming to you from the Millennium Falcon.
Yes. You need to get a background like I have.
Look at that.
Oh, wow.
Come on.
Pete's got a great shirt, and I want it. I covet. It is Darth Vader, Stormtrooper. It's all the plastic helmet gang.
When are you
Bubba.
up here? I have your birthday present. I don't even know when your birthday is.
I'm coming
March?
Wednesday. I'm coming Wednesday to do Ruben's rehearsal for his wedding.
You really think he's going to go through with it?
Well, from what I understand, people are giving him video games at his wedding, so I'm pretty sure
I did see him ask for video games. I thought that was pretty funny.
Do you see that I put no? This will hurt your marriage. First 6 months of marriage, do not play video games. Just look in your wife's eyes and tell her, I just want to be with you. Just do that for the first 6 months. Then secretly sneak it in.
I love that.
That's good advice.
Secretly sneak it in.
Well, not secretly, but subtly is the word I'm going for. Don't keep secrets from your wife. That's a bad idea.
Ooh, I got all kinds of secrets. You want to know some of them?
I don't want to know about them. I think I know them all because I was your pastor.
You're like, I think I know them all because I was there with you when it happened.
I know everybody's secrets as a pastor. It's funny, man. I'll talk sometimes to people outside the church, and I'll be like, "Yeah, no, man. I mean, I've been a pastor. I know everybody's secrets over time. I mean, people pretty much suck. That's my biblical view of the world." And people are like, "Yeah, that's true. That's true. People suck." So I'm on a 30-day political fast.
Oh, wow.
So I can't watch videos about how the other side is a bunch of morons because I was watching that. I'm
when you say that
everybody's morons.
When you say that statement, you could literally pick either side.
Right. I mean, I watch them both and I get mad at both. And then I get doubly mad at the media for their hypocrisy and the fact that they're morons reporting like, it's like Bugs Bunny when you go, what a moron, what a boob, what's the other word that Bugs Bunny uses?
I don't know.
What a maroon, that's what it was. What a maroon. So when I walk away from them all, I'm like, you guys are morons. And then I think, but I'm the bigger moron watching these videos. So I finally kind of decide to take myself in hand. I'm old. So I get up in the morning right now, Pete, and I drink my coffee, but I can't, like in the morning, I hurt so bad. So you guys know I have a neurological condition. Some of you don't. Well, there you go. Bye-bye. It's on you. I have this neurological condition. So
is it called living?
It is. And it gets worse with time, Pete. The disease advances until finally death takes you. But,
until death comes for us all.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, at night it's worse. But it's now started in the morning where I'm in pain every morning. I do not, if you know me, I was an RN. I hate taking pain medicine. So I don't. I just figure I'll man it out, I'll push through it. And then, and so I'm starting to stretch. Well, what I was doing is I was putting videos on. I was getting sucked in while I was waiting for the coffee to brew. And then I would sit there watching the video, not reaching over and taking care of coffee. And I'm like, yeah, no, this isn't good. And it was all the political videos sucking me in. And so I'm on a fast now. And what do you know, Pete? I actually do productive things during that time.
Do you?
Yeah. I read books.
My aunts, they all messenger me these videos. And I'm like, don't send this stuff to me. I'm not going to watch it in Messenger. I don't care about Trump. I don't care about Biden. I'm not going to watch any of it. It's not
It's
happening.
like a holy crusade for some people right now. It is like their thing. They're convinced that they're standing against the pagan deities and
Well, yeah, like the America is going to collapse if their guy doesn't win.
yeah, but every 4 years I hear
America
this.
already collapsed. We already, it's gone.
Yeah, the fact that we are where we are, the fact that we had Hillary and Trump 4 years ago, and now we got Biden and Trump is just so laughable. Like,
Oh,
you
man.
got to step outside
That was the
of that.
best we could put up. That was the best from either party.
Oh, my gosh.
Like, what does that tell you about America?
America is just crazy. Crazy.
Yeah.
So, and I know we just lost half our audiences.
Wait, you're
you
not
both
for
have.
Trump? What?
Or you're not for socialism or what? I mean, it's just weird, man. It's all weird. So right now, the way that it's positioned is each side. If you're the right, you're convinced that if you vote in Biden, you're voting in the pedo army, and then if you're voting Trump, you're voting in the racist army. So that's what we have in 2020. We have an election that's we got to choose between racists and pedos. If you listen to the media, and isn't that fun? Which one? Which one's worse? Racist?
Well, I
or
got to
pedos?
tell you, that's actually a clear-cut decision between racist and pedos. If that was real, that's actually not a difficult decision. I'm just gonna go out there and say that. You know,
I gotta tell you, you know, it's weird days, man. Both
dude,
of them.
What do you
so
think about
demonize
that?
it.
They found 39 kids in a
Right.
double wide in Georgia.
And you haven't heard anything about it.
Well, I mean, Facebook.
Yeah,
That's where I get my news. But
I mean,
how's that not crazy news?
you know, I was telling my wife about that just before we fell asleep, as you do. Hey, by the way,
By the way, they rescued like 39 kids out of a double wide in Georgia.
Right, that's what I told her, and she goes, "Oh, where'd you?" Always, my wife, when I say something like that, is, "Where'd you hear that from?" Because she's convinced that I've been suckered by some side or the other, you know, like I've been watching. And that's where we're at nowadays. You know, we're way past like the Walter Cronkite days where people just told the news and, you know, like the meme I saw this morning, just let you make your own opinion, which I'm not convinced Walter Cronkite did that either. But there was a time in journalism where it was just, here's what happened. And this is what happened. But then, you know, we would complain, right? If all they put was double wides of 39 kids getting rescued from, we'd be like, oh, why don't they ever tell us anything happy?
Yeah, that's true, right?
We complain too. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure those kids deserved it. You know, I mean, they were abandoned by their parents like, there's a lot of people who would say stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's how jacked up this country is. Well, it's not just
you.
a country, it's the world. It's man. It's mankind.
Yeah, every once in a while I trip out on Americans. I'll be watching something, and being a psych nurse, I'm just like, man, there's so many mentally ill people in this country walking around that you don't realize. Like, if you're a psych nurse, you see it really easy.
Really? Huh.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'll see people making YouTube videos, and I'll be like, oh, they're mentally ill. And it's
really?
Just, oh, dude, yeah.
Wow.
Well, you just know. There's just certain... There's a certain vibe. And yeah, I mean, tons. But I also think it's the amount of people that have been abused in this country. When you look at the stats of how many people have been abused sexually by a certain age, it makes sense. You're like, well, you're just, of course, you know, you're damaged, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. It's weird. It's weird.
Boy, that went south fast.
Well, I mean, there's so much stuff going on. Like right now, today is first day of school for my kids. Did your kids start?
Yeah, last week.
And is it in person? Is it distance? What is it for you guys?
It is in person.
Why are you smiling like that?
It had to have been you. But there was a meme where the mom is welcoming the kid home from school, and she goes, "That's not the mask I sent you to school with." And the kid goes, "No, because I traded Johnny for one that he traded Mark with, and now I have this one. I like it way better."
Yeah.
The kids trading masks. So funny. Dude, and on the first day of school, by the way, guess what happened? My daughter came home. Kids were licking each other. That's the first thing kids are going to do. I'm going to get you, lick each other, taking their masks off and licking each other. So just saying.
Where do they go to school? Like what city? What city? I just want to know the city.
I'm in San Diego County.
Okay, so it's not the one in Costa Mesa. Wasn't there a school in Costa Mesa they went to at one time? No,
never. No.
Because I gotta find an in-person school, man. Today, first day of distance learning, we're like, this is not going to work.
Here, I'm just saying, come move.
No, if I move, it's not in the state of California. I'm getting the heck out of Dodge.
I got you, man. I feel you. Yeah, the governor's got some fun plans in place for us coming up. Did you watch his broadcast last week?
No, I'm not. Political fast. He
was all kinds of excited. Like, well, see, that's the thing is that was actually an announcement of a current event. So rather than it being political,
it's not. That's a political. Like none of that is current events.
It definitely wasn't scientific or accurate, but it was. He was like, "We're doubling down this time. We were more lax, but now this time we are going to get serious." And there's all these like ways of controlling, and it's kind of only California.
Literally, right now, it's only California.
Yeah.
It's so criminal to me. So criminal. Don't get me going on that one.
No. Let's walk towards the light, Pete. Walk towards the light.
I feel like a mosquito heading towards the light, and it's not necessarily a good light. So what else is happening with you, man?
Pretty.
What else is happening with you? I haven't talked to you in a week and a half since somebody missed podcast last week.
I did tell you some big news right before this.
You did. And I know before other people know. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, it's big news. But I did finish my book last night at 9:30.
How many times have you finished the book?
I mentioned you twice in that book. You should be happy about this.
Yeah, not by name. There's this guy I know. Let me tell you a little something about this troublemaker.
I'll mention you twice to make up for not mentioning you in the last. Actually, I didn't mention anybody in the last.
But this is your third book. I should get 3 mentions.
But I mentioned you in the first one. No, you're in my first.
You don't say my name.
Zero by name.
I don't think no.
Oh yes, you are in Big Guns Marketing. A little pluggy plug there.
If you did, then I got to change my whole philosophy on Peyton Jones.
I think you need to go back and.
I might be owing an apology here.
So I named you and your company in the first book, and then but not in the second one. So I owe you. So I upped it to 2. You're the only person who gets 2, except for Andrea.
I should definitely get higher billing than Andrea.
Oh, you can't. I can't even respond. I can't dignify that.
Look, when you're having problems with Andrea, who do you call? It's not Andrea. It's this guy. I'm just kidding.
Definitely not you.
Definitely not me. Like, who's the one person on the planet you would never go to advice for in marriage? That would be Pete. Let's just stay away.
Wow.
Yeah. So nothing new is happening with you.
Well, the book, and I will say this: I was going back editing it, and there were certain chapters. I shouldn't say this because I want you all to buy it. There were certain chapters I was like, this is just garbage. How did my editor not say, hey, dude, chapter 9 is garbage? It wasn't chapter 9, but I went through and I worked on it. And I'm actually, I have to say,
that's about 8 chapters more than I read in a book. Sorry, go on.
Dude, on a book this size, I'm actually really proud of it. I felt like I was able to write a good book. And I know that sounds like I never feel when I'm done writing, I feel super insecure, but I've spent so much of my life on this book, so much time on it. And this time around, there were almost entire chapters that got rewrites. And I actually feel like this is a good contribution to the conversation. There's going to be a lot of stuff that is going to be very, very different from the standard church planning stuff out there. There's some stuff I came back and just sat back from. I was like, I actually feel what I've written here is going to help planters and perhaps change some of these conversations for years to come. And that may sound really arrogant, but I mean, I'm surrounded by hundreds of books right now that I've read in multiple times, in and out. And there's some really good books out there. There's one by Craig Ott, Global Church Planning. That book is absolutely fantastic. Like his book almost makes me think I shouldn't have even written a book. That dude's book is so good.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, you probably shouldn't have even written a book.
No, you're talking to the first person to admit that, to be honest. I've felt that many, many times. You write a book, you start feeling like you're reading everything. Why am I even doing this? But in the end, it was good. So I'm done. And I finished last night at like 10 o'clock at night instead of like 4 a.m. for my deadline today. I was done. I was like, I'm done. I'm out.
You felt good about that, right?
I felt good.
I'm done.
I was like, I'm going to come in and watch Cobra Kai.
Did you? What do you think?
I'm on episode 3.
Okay.
I will start that tonight. I can see what they're doing. They're telling a more middle of the road story. I don't think Daniel LaRusso's the good guy yet. I'm starting to think there's a lot of gray on both.
Yeah, I don't know, because I'm probably at episode 3, but I watched it a few months ago, and then Jamie and I couldn't really get into it, so we didn't go any
because
further.
They're changing it. They make you like the bad guy, quote unquote. I don't think there's a good guy and bad guy. I think what they're going to do is they're going to show bad things in Daniel LaRusso, because already he's kind of a twit. Like when you're watching him, you're like, he's kind of like, yeah, actually I kicked you in the face. And you're like, okay, that's bad guy behavior. I think they've switched it around a little bit.
Interesting.
Really interesting. Yeah. So I think there's more gray. What I really want to see, though, is Bill and Ted Face the Music.
I couldn't bring myself to buy it, because you can, like,
$25, right?
Yeah, it's $25.
Or you rent it for $20,
which is like, I might as well spend the extra $5.
Right.
It doesn't even make any sense.
Right.
But because California, our movie theaters aren't open, so there's like obviously other parts of the country they're open, and I'm sure people saw it. It's got good ratings though, so I'm torn. I'm like, I
watched 2 reviews and it got good reviews, and they're like, okay, look, obviously it's not going to be the first and second one, but they brought Death back, and he's my favorite. I still to this day hear those conversations in my head nonstop. And there's that on the trailer where
I hated
their daughters are on it. See, I love the second.
I thought the second one was horrible.
Oh, God.
And again, this comes down to you and I have very different movie tastes.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
There's a scene because their daughters are in it, and their daughters perfectly mimic them. So the girl, when she's talking like Ted, she's going like this when she's talking, which is great. And then, but what's funny is they're like, they show up in hell and their daughters are there, and they're like, how are you? And they're like, well,
we're dead.
And we're in hell. And he goes, yeah, but how are you?
Yeah. And they're like, well, not that bad.
Which I guess is, as a man of the cloth, I'm not, and as a gospel preacher, I'm not supposed to think that's funny, but that's funny. So maybe that's why I think it's funny, is because I'm not.
But isn't that so how the world, if they believe there is a hell, that's kind of how they view it. That's where all my friends are going to be.
Dude, our album covers totally lied to us. That's from episode 2 when they first get down to hell. Hey, get that guy's attention. Yo, devil dude. He's not looking. Dude, flash him the devil sign.
Yeah, I never got into the second one.
Oh, I loved it. You have sunk my battleship. Playing Battleship with the Grim Reaper was the best. So 2 out of 3. Come on. That's comedic gold.
I guess so.
Yeah. Happy days, Al. So what's up with your life? What's going on with you, man?
I had a great story for last Thursday.
You did. And I ruined that. I had a senior moment. Like, it freaked me out that I forgot. Out and out, guys, the reason it's broadcasted, I literally forgot. Senior moment.
What I do is I use Google Calendars, and it gives me reminders. And I'm like, oh, I got a podcast coming up here with Peyton. I should probably jump on. No, I am so Luke's birthday was the 20th, and he got this electric scooter. So, I mean, come on, man. It's an electric scooter. How fun is an electric scooter? So I'm jumping on that thing.
Dude.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, you don't even have to push. You just jump on and hit the button and you're like tearing off through the neighborhood. And so I just grabbed it Wednesday night. I'm like, oh man, I'm just going to go down the street. So I go down the street and my wife had our slip and slide on. So there was a lot of water in the street. And I decided, because I rode down the sidewalk and I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to turn around in the street because there's all this street. So much easier to turn around.
Yeah.
And I'm goofy foot, right? So I shouldn't be turning to the right because I'm goofy foot. So I don't do that turn very well. I turn to the left much easier. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to turn to the right. Oh, there's a puddle there. Not a big deal. Dude, as soon as I hit the water, it slides out. I just smack the ground so hard. So I'm like,
I saw your skate tattoos on Facebook.
Dude, you should have seen it when it was muddy because that water was muddy.
Ooh.
So I like quickly jump up, right? Because I'm like, I don't want the neighbors to see me, right? Don't want the neighbors to see me. So I jump up, go back, and my mother-in-law, my son, and my daughter are like, oh, you're muddy. You got to go take a shower. And I'm like, yeah, I got to go take a shower. I'm thinking, underneath the mud, there's got to be blood. Dude, so bloody. I mean, I had like, the leg was bandaged up so bad because it was oozing all night long. It was nasty.
Ooh, it was oozing. Was it like making noises? Like, was it communicating? Like, take me to your leader. That would have been rad.
No.
Was it opening up and going, feed me?
It was not. What was that thing called?
Well,
Little Shop of Horrors. It was not the plant Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah, and then my mind went to Freddy Krueger movie where somebody's wounds were
But I had
like little mouths.
I have a really nice huge welt on my hip / butt. I mean,
dang.
I can't even lay on my side at night,
Okay.
which is how I normally go to sleep.
Did anyone laugh when you fell though?
No one saw.
See,
No one
that's the
saw.
worst is when you fall and you get hurt and people are laughing like your loved ones are over
That's
there.
why I quickly jumped up. I'm like, man, I hope the neighbors didn't see.
I'm fine.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm the cool dad. Everyone think I'm the cool dad. And then the next day, I'm like riding it again, and my son's like, "You're really gonna go back out on it?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude. I fell. That's it.
So rad.
Time to get back home."
So good.
Yeah, it's gnarly. I still have just this huge welt. Huge welt. I'm using all kinds of medication to try and get that sucker to heal up.
What are you
Nice.
using? Talk to me as a nurse. I will give you medical advice. Don't sue me if it's wrong.
I'll tell you off podcast. It's nothing
Once
that
a day I
our
pee on
audience
it.
would think is
I read-
bad, but
Okay,
I'll tell you off podcast.
All right. It's not like a sea urchin, Pete. None of these home remedies from like anti-vaxxers or anything. Oh, sorry. We just lost our other half of our audience. Hey, you got to understand, even though I've only seen 2 South Park episodes in my life, which is the WoW one and then the Michael Jackson one.
Hey, did Kenny die in those?
I don't know. I think
He dies in every
definitely
episode.
died. Yeah,
He dies in every
died
episode.
WoW. But everybody died in the WoW episode. But,
Oh, really?
But anyways, I was going to say, you have to understand, that's our podcast. We are literally we're literally that podcast where we will offend you equally if you haven't figured this out already.
They're getting to the picture.
Yeah, I think they're getting it.
We should probably just get into our topic. Great,
Probably,
Scott.
man.
It's time for this week's topic. Let's get
Down to the knitting.
Go ahead, do it. Deliver it.
Lady. All right, I just said the word, but Church Planner Podcast. It's not the church. It's not the podcast planners deserve. It's a podcast they need.
I love it.
I snorted. I was, kind of loving what I did there. All right. So, guys, what we want to talk about today is, and by the way, I have to say, Pete, your titles on this podcast, I went back and I looked at the titles over like the last 3 months. They're hilarious.
I don't even know what I put.
Okay, here's a couple. Paul's way to plant. No, just joking. The planner's calling one about episode 400, which is typically us.
Yeah.
That's what Paul said? Come on.
Oh, man.
Oh, that was funny. But okay, so admittedly, the rest of them aren't that funny, but that one was really funny. And once I read that one, they all looked funny to me. And now as I'm looking at them, they're not funny anymore. Okay, but Corona can't keep a good podcast down. That's hilarious. So anyways, that was funny. There is one called bivocohort.com, The Secret to Pete's Success. That kind of struck me.
That's got to be an old one. That's got to be
You're
really
Going
old.
to Hell with Dan Berg. That was a good one. So
yeah. Who was Dan Berg? He was your friend, right?
He was
were
my
on that
mentor.
one?
He was my first ministry mentor.
Dude, that was a crazy podcast. I should go back and re-listen to that one.
He was good. And Dan's like one of those guys where he's one of those guys where he's got tons of wisdom and he speaks slow. So when you're talking to him, he'd be like, yes, well, and he's going to think out what he's saying, which I don't know why that didn't rub off on me. So, but that guy, oh my gosh, that guy taught me. We would be in these meetings where like literally we would be in exorcisms or be miraculous conversions. And then we would go back to his house and we would watch MTV Yo Raps, like late at night and just fall apart watching Humpty and all this stuff. And a lot of times they were showing like really low budget videos and they were just awesome. And we would laugh and laugh and laugh at, I'm telling you, it was good, man. Oh, and Tom Vu. Like it wasn't just
nice.
MTV Yo Rap. It was all late night television because we'd be there at like 1 or 2. So it was stuff that wouldn't show during mainstream. And oh my gosh. And like we would just flip through the channels and just laugh. Infomercials, yada, yada, yada. And I learned then, I was like, man, you can, because it's kind of in a way, it was kind of how you decompressed. And I think that's like literally kind of moved over into my psyche of how I deal with everything. When I became a firefighter, I became a nurse. Oh my gosh. So, all right.
So what's today's topic?
Well, Pete, I'm glad you asked. We're going to talk today about what it means to what kind of gifting a planter needs. Like, what's the raw material that a planter has to have? Well, did you see the remake recently of The Call of the Wild with Harrison Ford, Han Solo?
I don't know that I don't know if I saw it or not. Is it on Disney Plus?
It was pretty much the story of a boy and his Wookiee. Right. I mean, it's Harrison Ford, right? So you're thinking dog Chewbacca. I see the connection here.
Does he name the dog Chewie? Because if he does,
he names him Buck, which I think was a nod to Buck Rogers. No, just teasing. If you don't know, it's a Jack London novel. It's written in like the 1800s. And it's about the Klondike gold rush. And this guy, it's about this guy, John Thornton. The main character is the dog. You're following the dog, not the dude. But when the dog gets with this dude, John Thornton, they end up going up north to stake a gold claim somewhere around the Yukon. And as Buck's out in the woods, he keeps venturing out. And throughout the story, he's domesticated. But the more he gets out in the wilderness, the more he meets this phantom. It's like you don't know if it's an actual wolf or if it's a phantom, but the story's told through Buck, the dog's point of view, if you've ever read the book. And so he keeps talking about, and he calls him the wild brother. The wild brother keeps coming to him. And so I would say that's kind of like, so what he does is Buck starts going out into the wilderness more and more, and he eventually becomes the leader of the wolf pack, right? And so I would say that there's this process in ministry where we start off a little bit like Buck, and we're domesticated in ministry. We're stripped of the apostolic because of the form and function of the local church. When you first got saved or first thought about ministry, it's probably because you're reading the book of Acts or you heard a story about J. Hudson Taylor or John Wesley or something like that. And you were like, man, that sounds amazing. I totally want to serve God like that. Like case in point, last night when I was just doing some final research for the book, I came across part of George Whitfield's diary where they were trying to get him to either stay on at Oxford in Christ Church and do more study, or there was a church in Gloucester, which is, in England. And they were like, hey, would you want to come take this? And he couldn't shake that he felt, this is where he says, all the world is my parish. He felt, no, I'm not supposed to be nailed down to one area. I feel like I'm called to do something wider, not bigger. Because around that time, he also, he was preaching and people were responding, and he knew he was starting to get famous. But before he got ordained, he spent 2 weeks wrestling through. He's talking to ministers, and none of them could help him. He's saying, why do I feel this way? Why do I not? I don't want these other positions or openings. I feel, and what he was feeling was he was feeling the call of the wild brother. He was feeling this apostolic call, like Buck the dog. And what he writes in his journal, excuse me, what he writes in his journal.
I had a heart attack this big, and I gave myself one of these. Clear! And now I'm fine.
I need water is what it is, and they didn't bring it in. I've been kicked.
How do you do a podcast without grabbing a water?
Well, I drank it. I was on this crazy call before an hour and a half long marketing call with Exponential before this. So, and I drank it. The real miracle is how I don't have to go pee after over 2 hours after drinking all my water. But anyways, I'll get back to it, Pete. So what Whitfield did is for 2 weeks, he just studied the prophets, their mission, and then he read the apostles. And it was so cool to kind of, especially writing what I write, to go back and to find him saying that, like that he went back to the mission. He said, I spent 2 weeks reading the mission of the prophets and the mission of the apostles. And he says, and I begged God for the grace to step out boldly in their footsteps. Like, how cool is that, right? Like, he had security, he had a career, he had all this, and he's like, no, I got this call of the wild brother. And I feel like the Apostle Paul and the other apostles, they call out to us from the scriptures, and we know intrinsically as planters that we're not going to be a traditional pastor. And praise God that traditional pastors exist. I mean, I've had to be careful over the years that I don't bag on those guys, because what I've come to realize is those are shepherds and teachers. And they're doing what shepherds and teachers should do. The problem is they're doing it alone. They should, shepherds and teachers should always have teams around them of evangelists, apostles, prophets, which are the radical members of the APEST team makeup, to keep them balanced. But what we've done is we've gotten rid of all the apostles, prophets, evangelists, and Pete, we've talked about this ad nauseum on this podcast, so I don't want to get back into that. But when you look at Paul, the way he describes his role, when we ask the question, what does it mean? Like, what gifting do you need? Well, it's good to start off asking, what's the role going to be? Like, what do you actually do as a planter? What are you supposed to biblically do? Well, listen to what Paul, just looking at what he wrote to the Corinthians, he uses the word planter, right? But what he's planting is he's planting the gospel, right? He's reaping gospel converts. And I know people don't want to hear that, but that's what he's saying. He's not saying, like, it's trendy to go, I don't make converts, I make disciples. Well, that's great and all, but Paul made converts. He did make disciples, but he also made converts. And so when he says, I sowed the seed, Apollos watered, he was an evangelist, and God alone gave the increase. What he's saying there is he says one harvest. So the harvest is used in terms of salvation. So Paul was a planter. So his chief work was gospel work. So that right away sets you apart as an apostolic church planter from just being a pastor. Your chief work is preaching and sowing the gospel. And if you're doing something else, you're not a church planter, really. You might be a shepherd who's starting a church, but you're not a planter, right? He's a foundation layer. And he lets us know again that no man can lay any other foundation than that which was already laid, namely Christ Jesus. So again, he's planting the gospel. He's laying the foundation of Christ, and he's having everything else being built upon that. So the whole church, the church's practices, the lifestyle, everything is built on who Jesus was, what he did, and the implications of his death and resurrection. Then he also uses the term architecton, which is architect. So he's saying, I'm also an architect. And that right there kind of implies that there's design and strategy, and you're setting up something where there was nothing there before. And then lastly, he says, I'm an ambassador, right? He also says he was a father. I was like a father to you. So he's gonna shepherd them and make disciples. But then lastly, an ambassador is, he says, wherever I go, I'm glorifying Christ. Like I am there to be a witness to who Jesus is. So that's kind of cool. So one of the things.
Oh, is that the train?
Train. So one of the things that's
this
really
podcast would not be complete without the train.
It would not.
After 403 episodes, you need the train.
Absolutely. And to kind of, build off that architect part, when you look at the guys that were truly apostolic in church history, guys like Count Zinzendorf, he started this thing called the Mustard Seed Society, and then he put a system in place. Like, I know we typically don't think of systems and structures as being like very spirit-led, but Paul was a systems guy. Like, he put networks in place. He operated them. You can see his systematic approach. Wesley, a comprehensive group system called band, society, and classes, which were like gradations of small groups that form networks and sub-networks. And then Watchman Nee, he spawned one of the most prolific revival and renewal movements in history. He was very systematic. So it seems like Paul and then all these guys in church history, they had very much the same kind of thing going on, where it might have been heart religion, to quote John Wesley, but there was also a strategy. God gave these guys strategic minds. And whereas Whitefield at the end of his life said, my followers are a rope of sand, he was saying there's nothing to hold them together. Like, I made a bunch of converts, but I didn't build anything that would cause them to replicate or a movement to keep going. He just felt like he had missed a crucial step. And so, that was, that's important. So, one of the things, and I think we talked about this a little while back, Pete, was we talked about the word apostolos, which means sent one. And I always want to be really clear on this, that we use the word called. I was called to ministry, which is like God calling you to himself, right? That's the language. The word calling, the word we actually use is the word appointed. I've appointed you, yada, yada. That's used for prophets in the Old Testament, or, God calls Israel to himself. There's always a sense in which God calls us to himself, and he's called all of us to himself. But in the Bible, you don't see the word calling being used for like elders and deacons, what we would consider leadership. Those words are never used. The word that's actually used is the word appointed, but it's not appointed by God. The people that appoint in the scripture, the place where we find these terms used is Titus appoints elders and deacons, and Timothy appoints elders and deacons. both the passages that have parallels, Paul goes, look for people with these qualities and these traits and appoint them as elders and deacons. So you don't need a special calling to be on leadership. And I think we have a lot of confusion about that, right? Like I could be an elder in a church. If my character's in place and I'm able to teach and my wife or spouse is not a gossip, right? These kinds of things, there are all these criteria where Paul goes, appoint that person for the church because you're going to move on. And this is where we get into the apostolic, because the apostolos or the apostolic planter is sent. They're not called, they're sent. So where we get into trouble is somebody goes, well, I think I'd like to be in leadership. And I feel very strongly that that's what God wants me to do. Now, you can have an inner compulsion. You can be seeking the Lord and you feel God telling you it's your will or, it's God's will. But there's always going to be an appointing. You don't just take it upon yourself to be a pastor of a church. Someone else will appoint you. But I guess what I'm getting at is that the way I see it, the APES gifts are all elders, but the apostle is the only one that is sent. Does that make sense?
It kind of does.
Yeah. So if you have and here's where Alan Hirsch is really helpful. Alan Hirsch says, when we all become mature, we all begin to show the APES traits in maturity. Like, for example, if you have a shepherd on staff at your church, or he's part of leadership, let's look at a team of elders. You've got shepherd, evangelist, and teacher. Those three roles right there are going to pull out of you. The evangelist is going to be like, Pete, let's go share the gospel. And you'd be like, no, I don't want to. No, come on, it'll be fun. You'll learn. No, God, you need to learn this. And you'll start becoming more evangelistic because, as it says in Ephesians 4, that role equips you to do the work of the ministry. And by the way, if you're in leadership and you're church planning, this is the goal. The goal is not for you to have a church. The goal is for you to develop the gifts of others. And if you're apostolic church planners, you can go, right? But it's not just developing other leaders. It's developing leaders who can develop others, because the real work of the ministry is done by the body. And you saw that in Long Beach, Pete. The strength of Refuge Long Beach it wasn't the leaders doing everything. It was the leaders were mobilizing the congregation to do stuff. And that makes all the difference. So, well,
yeah. And that also turned a lot of the congregation into leaders.
And that's to me what discipleship really is. I believe if anybody gets discipled, they just begin to develop in these ways. Like, that's what discipleship is. Like, how many people, I don't want to embarrass you, but everybody that's worked in connection with this podcast, if they weren't saved already, got saved, right? And that wasn't me. That was you. That was your witness and your influence on them. And that's kind of the thing, is that what I'm saying is everybody has this within them. So when you appoint, like I could tap you and say, Pete, would you come on to leadership? And you'd always be like, no, I'm never coming on to leadership. And some of that might be influenced by the fact that your dad was a pastor and there's this high standard.
I know what it is for me.
Okay.
Because I always knew how sinful I was in my life. And it was like, there's no way you're putting me on as an example for people to look up to.
Yeah. And I totally get that. And yet, it's the reason I think we're appointed by others is because we've all got that going on. But when someone externally sees in you, hey, I see character, I see this, all the things that Paul lays out. Then someone says, hey, we think, and you can always reject it. You can say, like, for example, I would say that if someone says, no, I really don't think that's where I'm, every right to say that, right? Everybody should reserve that right to say, that's not right for my family right now. Or, I'm not in the place where I want to be right now, where I feel like I could lead people, but that's cool. You see those qualities in me. I think everybody ought to do that. And, there's times, to be honest, where I'm out of ministry in between church plants, and me and Andrea together will be like, that's probably good we're not in ministry right now. like we're facing these challenges and this and that. And, right now, I think God's taken me through stuff that I need to develop in where I'm probably not fit to lead right now. So, and that's the beauty of going in and coming out, right? It's not like for life. And I think we get a lot of these things wrong, but, anyways, it's a paradigm shift. It's a massive, major paradigm shift when you start to go, wow. So leadership is for the everyday believer who has these qualities. And what we're really saying is a leader is it's a fully formed disciple. It's someone who's really exhibiting Christ in them, and their job is to equip and mobilize others. Wow, that takes the mystique out of it. And then it raises the entire body to an understanding that all of us are really, when we're mature, expected to be leaders. We might not all have the gift of leadership. That's different. But I could serve as an elder if I'm able to teach. Some people aren't able to teach, and that's a key thing. If you don't have the gift of teaching, you probably should not, because the part of every single one of those gifts, if it's to equip others, then teaching becomes a part of that, right? So, but anyways, the apostle is the one that has to be commissioned and sent, because you will be leaving as a missionary. And I know people say, oh, but we're all on mission. That's true. And that's correct. Right. But that does not mean, that's like saying we all have the Holy Spirit within us. Well, we do, but we're not all filled with the Holy Spirit. Right. Like when it says be filled with the Holy Spirit in Ephesians, he's saying don't be filled with wine, be filled with the Spirit. That's an imperative. Like that doesn't mean I'm always full to overflowing with the Holy Spirit in my life, right? But yes, the Holy Spirit's in me. You know what I'm saying? There's a difference, right? Yes, we're all on mission, but like I tell people, because a lot of people within the missional movement, they will argue to the point where we're all on mission. And but when did you leave your fat paycheck? When did you leave and go overseas? When did you leave your family and your friends and all the, when we talk about that, there was a price tag attached to all of that when I left my country, my home. Like everybody's not called to that. I had to have a commission from God to do that, or I never would have done it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
That kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So being a sent one literally means that you are sent. So I'm not called. It's not like God saying, come to me, Peyton. No, God's saying, Peyton, go. Like I'm commissioning you to go to Wales. I am commissioning you to go to this place, and I want you to go. And so in that sense, we're all sent ones. And that term, by the way, is used of Titus in 2 Corinthians 8:23. It was used of James, the Lord's brother, Galatians 1. Apostolos is the word sent one. Barnabas, Apollos, Andronicus, Junius, Epaphroditus, Timothy, and Silvanus. And guess what was in common with all these guys? They were sent out. They didn't stay put in the local church. They went out. So that I always tell people it's the word for missionary. And even though the word missionary does not exist in the New Testament, it does. Sent one means the same thing. And that's the word that we translate as like fellow worker or, whatever it is. But I think it's important for you to realize that if you are being sent out by God, as an apostle or apostolo with a small a, that's what that is. No man can appoint you to that. You have to be sent, not called to ministry, sent to ministry. And that's a distinction that I think needs to be made in the church right now. Because our language for the last few hundred years was, have you been called? No, the real question is, have you been sent? Right? Because if you're called, if you're appointed, that's by man, and that applies to the other roles. You can't be appointed to the role of apostolos, right? Because you've got to go and you've got to be sent by God. That is a commission. Yes, we're all commissioned by the Great Commission to be his witnesses in Jerusalem, whether you stay, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. It's that ends of the earth bit, right? That's what I'm talking about here. You need a call for that. but we're running out of time, Pete. So let's go ahead and sum up. I don't have new sponsors. I'm looking for new sponsors. I'm not advertising for you guys. I just haven't picked up the phone and gone after them yet. But our normal sponsorship, I'm getting ready, Pete, to write like a little docudrama of you and I where we're going to simulate. Not today, but you guys got to watch for it. It's coming. There's a script coming, Pete, where there'll be a scenario. And it'll be very melodramatic, and it will be a commercial for our current sponsor, which is Simplify Church.
Okay, are they still a sponsor, or did you go ruin that relationship too?
No, not yet. But we'll see after my drama.
As if you're the one that ruins the relationship. It's usually me.
No, it's flipped around. Hey, in the last few years, I would say I've caught up. In fact, I may have surpassed you in losing sponsorship for us. Losing listeners, it's usually me now.
Hey, look, until you joke about fraud and you get 3 merchant accounts shut down because of a joke, you'll never be at my level. I'm just going to throw that out there.
That's a rad. Well, hey, Pete, while you're doing all this being sent, how are you going to do all your bookkeeping?
I'm so glad that you asked, because usually what I would do is I would call up my buddy Travis, who was my assistant. I'd say, Travis, I got some work for you to do. Travis no longer works for me. He has, unfortunately for me, moved on to bigger and better things. He's now a youth pastor in Washington. So I would go to simplifychurch.com. In fact, I'd reach out to Josh Henry over there at simplifychurch.com. And I'd say, hey, Josh, I need some help. I need some help with IRS compliance, with getting all this tax stuff done, taxes. I don't even know what that is, really. Can you help me? And you know what he'd say? He'd say, yes, Pete, we can help.
But only because Peyton and Pete sent you.
That's true.
See what I did?
That's very true.
See what I did?
I like it.
Sent. Yeah, baby. Because they apostoloed you. Oh, boy. This podcast is lame. You've been listening to the very lame Church Planner podcast. It's cool because Pete's on, but it's lame because I'm here. I think I made it lame.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone listens to this podcast, not for this guy, but for that guy.
Well, hey, lest I stink it up anymore today, let us just remind you, you've been listening to the Church Planner podcast. Great Scott, what in the heck have I been listening to? And this has been Peyton Jones and Pete Mitchell reminding you, if you want to reach ones nobody's reaching, you need to go where nobody's going and do what nobody's doing.
Thanks for joining us for another weekly episode of the Church Planner Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. We'd love to hear your comments on this episode of the Church Planner Podcast. Visit us online and let us know what you thought at churchplannerpodcast.com. If you subscribe to us via iTunes and have enjoyed the podcast, leave us a positive review. The more positive reviews we receive in iTunes, the more iTunes will promote us to other church planners who would benefit from this show. This podcast is brought to you by the Church Planner Magazine, which is available in the iTunes newsstand or online via churchplannermagazine.com.